I realize that the Russians are just idiots, and they're so stupid.
Those whose life is soaked in cheap booze have no chance to conquer us.
Kirill Stremausov lived in this building.
All those Pushkin poems, all those monuments to Lenin paved the way for a Russian tank.
They demanded that we sing the songs which they liked, such as Fellow Officers and others.
I returned in 54 days.
The screaming wouldn't stop.
We have now felt what freedom and liberty are really like.
You have no idea how long we've been waiting.
Are you really from Ukraine? Yes, we are. Say Palenitsa, Palenitsa.
Because we Ukrainians are united by fate.
It was a surprise for the Muscovites.
But they followed the Russian worship.
And it's okay to be in the basement. The main thing is that we're alive and well.
We have no water, even now. We have no central heating. But we also have no Muscovites here. That's why we're so happy.
Because they mess with Ukraine.
We must not forget to take a picture here later. Ladies and gentlemen, we came to Kherson, past Chornobayaka. The Kherson entry road is in good condition. Thank you, Russian bastards, for not ruining everything. Public minibuses are in operation. That's just unbelievable. Russia is here to stay forever. Russia is to stay here forever. How did the deoccupation take place here? You were directly involved in those events. You hoisted the first Ukrainian flag in Stanislav village, and here as well.
Yeah, that's right. We entered Alexandrivka and Stanislav together with the 28th Brigade. I hosted our Ukrainian flag at my house. I removed the flag that didn't belong there, the occupier's flag, the Russian flag, and then we hosted our Ukrainian flag.
How did people react to your arrival?
With tears in their eyes, they hugged us and kissed and gave us flowers. Even small children did so. And my neighbors, you know, they were crying as they saw me. I didn't expect this to happen. To be honest, my eyes were filled with tears as well. It was hard, yes, but we did the same job. I made a lot of friends, and we all helped each other. And I'm very thankful for all of this. And when I raised the flag up here, it is still flying there. That same flag, which we raised with the 28th Brigade. I was so glad. Being back at home makes me feel so happy, you know. Moreover, we are the locals of Kherson. Kherson has always been Ukrainian. No one here has ever supported Russia. We have always lived here. Everything was fine for us.
Is there anything written on the flag?
Yes, the flag was signed by people who were with us, those who took part in the events. I also left my signature on it. My call sign is Serhii, so I left it there as my signature. It was a real pleasure.
What is your personal story? You said you were in a special police force, the Berkut unit, right? There were those amongst the Berkut members, in fact, who fled to the Crimea and Russia.
To be honest, I believe that those people who went over to the side of the invaders, I'm not going to judge them. Why not? Because God will judge them. People have to decide for themselves somehow. In my view, if you live at your own home, that's your place. Keep living there. We should not change our native country, but this is my opinion. Why? That's how it is in my view. If you live in Ukraine, then keep living in Ukraine.
Tell us about that moment when you entered the city square here.
To be honest, when we entered the square, people were confused. They couldn't understand what was happening. They asked us, "Are you really from Ukraine?" I said, "Yes, we are." They asked, "Are you soldiers?" We answered, "We are indeed." They demanded, "Say Palenitsa." We said, "Palenitsa." "Okay, we believe you. Go on then." And we hoisted the flag.
Піднімають флаг. ЗСУ. Флаг України підіймається в Білому домі.
You went through the council, didn't you? Weren't you afraid that it was mined?
Yeah. We went up the stairs to the fourth floor and hoisted the flag. God damn it. It was so joyful. The people were very welcoming. I'm so grateful to all the people. People were hugging and kissing us. They were so happy. I'm so happy that most of the people in Kherson are in fact Ukraine supporters. God damn it. Sorry for the story.
That's okay. These are emotions. I see there is already graffiti with Zalunchny.
Yeah.
More and more Ukrainian symbols are appearing.
Of course, people are already beginning to understand. People are supporting, honestly. The joy is when you are home and you're alive and happy. Don't hesitate to kiss and to hug our servicemen and women. Ukraine did not expect to take a hit like this, but we countered it. The invaders thought that Ukraine would easily be captured. No way. Not when the air, the land, and the trees help us. Everything helps us. People are praying for us. This is the most important thing.
You're the one who was giving an interview in English in the first days of liberation.
Yes, just because I know English. And this was the first time that CNN Live and Sky News got here. And for some reason, the Ukrainian media were not allowed. The foreign journalists came and asked, "Who speaks English?" I gave an interview, and someone in the crowd who, as we say, understands language like a dog, which means they understand but can't say anything, commented, "Oh, very well said, mate." And the journalists also liked my speech.
Finally liberated, that we are free. Because now we have no electricity in the city, no water, no central supply heating, no mobile connection, no internet connection. But we have no Russians. And I'm extremely happy of that. We can survive anything, but we are free.
The Ukrainian word katsap in English, it translates as fucking Russians. I wasn't allowed to say fucking, so I had to say just Russians. Therefore, the phrase at the time sounded like this: we have no electricity, we have no water, even now, we have no central heating, we have no mobile network, but there are no Muscovites here, and that's why people are so happy. In the first days, there were celebrations here. People were coming out and finding out the news. Actually, this phrase became famous. It triggered the Muscovites' response, and they started to claim that I was either an American spy or the head of a special forces from Kyiv.
Finally liberated, that we are free.
Нас наконец-то освободили. Мы свободны.
Почему на английском? Очень странно. Возникает вопрос, он рядовой житель Херсона или просто рядовой?
How did the full-scale invasion start for you?
Initially, as I was saying, that most likely there would be no invasion. But if it were to happen, if they were to start an invasion, then they would lose. I was confident that there wouldn't be any invasion because I thought that they were just trying to intimidate us by moving their army around. And yet they started the invasion, and they are losing it now. Step by step, they're being pushed out. The north of Kharkiv region and the north of the Kherson region, as you can see, have already been deoccupied. As for my experience during the occupation, I participated in rallies.
In fact, the rallies ended at some point because people realized that it was impossible to oppose the military any further. What was the resistance like after that?
Then there was graffiti on the city walls.
There are a lot of yellow ribbons.
Yeah, ribbons. They are also pro-Ukrainian slogans. Of course, some of those have appeared after deoccupation, yet many were made during the occupation.
Have you ever talked to Russian occupiers?
I tried to avoid them. Those Russian bastards were wandering around everywhere. But still, there were some really crowded places, and we knew where to go to avoid them. Well, you know, other people talked to them, but they disgusted me, so I tried to avoid them. For some reason, they were most interested in people's garages. They would drive into a garage neighborhood, pull out all the gates with a tractor, and just loot everything.
Could they possibly be looking for civilian cars?
I think they were looking for weapons, maybe cars too. Were they checking the apartments? Well, they came to my block of flats, but were walking around less cocky. They just came, knocked on everyone's door. I was at home, but I was sitting and thinking, well, and who might that be? If they break in, then I'll go and say, oh, you know, I was asleep and I just couldn't hear anything. They just knocked on the door, I didn't open it, and they went away.
Did they try to track down those who were at the rallies?
Of course they did. They were most interested in three categories of people. Those were pro-Ukrainian activists, that is, those who were at rallies and those who organized them. The second category was those who were connected with the Ukrainian army in some way. That is, they could just be family members, or they could be people who received weapons, or could have received them. And the third category was just rich people, because they could be deceived and robbed.
These days, when we start speaking with people in the liberated territories, we find that they all speak Ukrainian. Even though quite a few people spoke mostly Russian before the full-scale invasion, this is no longer so. What about you?
The same thing. I still remember and understand Russian, but I'm trying to speak more Ukrainian now.
Why is this happening? Why do you think this is so important?
Well, this is happening because everyone here has seen enough of Muscovites. 8 months, it's a long time. It's a huge chasm. People who I used to know consistently supported the Russian world by voting for the pro-Russian political party. In the early days of the war, they even were afraid. They were afraid to openly say they supported Muscovites. They were afraid to say, finally, you came. We've been waiting for you for 8 years, and so on. They felt a different attitude from the other city residents. They felt that they were in the minority, and that the others were very hostile to them. I asked, are you glad that the Russians are here? No, we aren't. We didn't want it to be like this. They didn't want Muscovites to come here with weapons. They just wanted some sort of a friendly relationship. And then at some point, they even started to refer to the Ukrainian troops as our troops. That is, even during the occupation, such thoughts appeared. Now, after the liberation, of course, we've come out of the underground. Oh, the referendum. You might be interested in the Russian referendum, I guess.
We are.
Yeah, this is an incredible story, actually. It was held for 5 days. They put up their booths in the market, in the central part of the market. Yeah, some people voted, I have to admit, but 80% of them were old women, 15% were old men, and 5% they were lowlifes. That is, these were the major categories, but there were still not many of these people.
And what was the result?
Well, the result you already know. 146% of the population supported joining Russia and becoming the Muscovites' land here and now.
But it was impossible to even check how many people voted in Kherson. That is, there were percentages, but there was no indication of the quantity.
I think there was. I watched the video, and it may be difficult to find it now. It was from their propaganda channel, VTV+, namely broadcasting in the Kherson region. They took it over and made it work for them. According to that video, when 12% of ballots were counted in the so-called Kherson People's Republic, this was 660 votes. That is, 100% is 6,000. Before the war, 1,200,000 people lived in our region, so the Russians themselves revealed the information that very few people came to vote in the referendum. There were times when there was no internet. We had to watch their moronic propaganda TV. And sometimes, when you watch intently, there are such interesting things. You can sometimes see the truth. Sometimes it sticks out.
None of those who were promoting the voting came to our district. That is, it's a huge area, but there was no voting. At the time, we all agreed to remain in our homes and not to let them in, should they knock on the door. They didn't even come to the apartments. So in the entire huge city district, people stayed home, just as we did. And they didn't go to the center or any other parts of the city.
Well, the Russians simply made a nice TV picture for their audience, and that was it.
That's all they really needed, not a referendum.
They organized the voting in a handful of places, filmed it, and that's it. In those places where it was more difficult for people to hide, the occupiers could walk with. There were videos on which they walked with assault rifles. We were prepared for that as well, but no one came.
They held a referendum very quickly. 3 days before the event, they decided they would hold it. First, that stupid Stremousov, the deputy of the local occupation administration, was insisting that there will be no referendum. Why? Well, no one will believe it anyway. That was when Russians had no such intentions. But then something changed. The directives changed, and so did their plans, and the so-called voting was carried out. That was a real shame.
Where did you work?
I worked at the market, therefore all the time I could hear what the people's mood was like and what was happening. And in general, I'm a good listener, so I watched and listened carefully. A lot of people went to the regions controlled by Ukraine. When it was still possible to get to the Vasilyivka village, this was the people's popular route. Then even those who left Kherson through the Muscovites' territory, left via Crimea, still tried to go to Europe, or first to get to Georgia and then to Europe. No matter how, they were leaving. Few stayed in the Muscovites' territory, but not a lot, I don't think.
Mostly those who collaborated, right?
Collaborators, those who are more sympathetic to the regime. It's true that some people were scared. We were all scared. This Mariupol syndrome has been with us for a long time. People were worried that as the Ukrainian forces advanced, there would be severe, terrible fighting. I knew the Muscovites were scumbags. Now, with this full-scale invasion, I find out that they are just idiots, and they're really stupid. What I didn't know was that the Muscovites are such cowards. I wouldn't have believed that they would run away in just a day and a half. Somehow, I was just confident that they would be holding their positions, but they disappeared in just a day and a half? On the 9th of November, in the evening, the electricity and internet disappeared, and on the 11th of November, it turned out that we were liberated. I just saw 2 cars that passed with Ukrainian flags. I was so surprised thinking, guys, aren't you just a little bit too brave? Isn't it a bit too early? Maybe it's worth waiting a bit. As it turned out, it was no longer risky. They knew that the city had been liberated. We waved the flag of Ukraine, which was about 200 meters long. Finally, the occupation is over.
My name is Volodymyr Drobot. I was in Kherson from the first day to the last day of its occupation. I went to our peaceful rallies.
How did you get to the first rallies? How did they even start?
I went to the city square and saw that people were gathering. I knew several activists, and they told me what time and what days we would go. In the first days, up to 5,000 people came here, especially on Saturdays and Sundays. There were many Ukrainian flags and slogans. We sang Hey Hey Rise Up and Bayraktar songs.
Єдина соборна Україна! Запанує ми, браття, у своїй стороні.
People were singing the national anthem of Ukraine. And at first, the Russians were just watching us. But then every day, it was getting worse. Arrests, gunshots, stun grenades, and tear gas were used. And every day, there were fewer and fewer people.
How long did it last?
All this lasted for almost a month.
Were there still people who tried to put up some resistance? Do you know about such cases?
I call her the Iron Lady. This is Halina Umanets. She has the People's Hero of Ukraine title and is an honorary citizen of our city. She was going to her rallies even during the occupation. Here, she had an office for a volunteer center. There were a lot of documents, a lot of flags, and even Molotov cocktails. During the occupation, I was helping her rescue at least something from there. Unfortunately, the Russians later captured her. And, as she said, they put a black bag over her head, beat her, undressed her, and threatened that they would cut off her breasts. asking for the names of the activists, but she told them, I don't know anyone. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you anything. They beat her up badly and threw her in the basement. She rolled down the stairs, losing consciousness. She is 70 years old. They thought that she was already dead, so they threw the body out. But she survived and got to the hospital. I'm not sure if she had been lying at her home for the last 3 days, or if she's still in the hospital. I can't reach her. She read poems by Taras Shevchenko and sang Ukrainian songs.
At the rallies?
Yes, at the rallies. And over there were the Russians, standing and watching. When they didn't like something, they started shooting in the air and throwing stun grenades.
Did any of the locals join the Russians when they were still standing there and you were here? Was there any pro-Russian meeting?
The occupiers were afraid to have some kind of pro-Russian meeting because there were so many more of us. Say, we could sweep them away. In the early days, there were only servicemen. They, for example, just watched us and turned on the song Katusha and other Soviet songs to shout over us. That's how it was. And then probably the Rosguardia police force arrived, which
job is to tackle unruly civilians.
Exactly. It was getting harder and harder every day. And then there were no people coming anymore, because when there were 5,000 or at least 500 protesters, this was more or less okay. But when there were only about 40 or 50 people, police could easily grab them and take them to the pretrial detention center. I tried to take photos and shoot videos because those were historic moments in our city. Twice I had to run away from the young hooligans who served the occupiers. I'm a local resident. I knew the route and the surroundings. I was lucky enough to escape.
How did they manage to capture you, or?
No, they came to me and asked, "What are you filming?" I realized that if they took my phone now, I would be arrested for a variety of reasons. The first time I ran and I was able to escape through the yards. Then I started taking videos from the trolley bus. Once at the bus stop near the central department store, I was filming people who were queuing to get Russian passports. And when I got off the bus, a young man followed me. He said, "Oh man, are you filming again? You managed to escape last time." I pretended to be a fool. I'm not filming anything, I was just checking what time it was. I got back to the trolley bus and got away. He also got on the same trolley bus, and when we got to the next stop, he went to the driver so that he wouldn't open the door. But the driver opened the door, and I jumped out. I was able to escape and take another bus. He didn't chase me for too long. He is 17 or 18 years old, and he was probably not as bold since he was alone. For about 2 or 3 days, I wasn't filming anything, and then I started again. But from inside the public transport.
What did you manage to film? What kind of videos? What are the key events that happened?
I filmed our rallies when Halina was singing and reciting poetry. I filmed what the situation was like in the early days and how many people were there. I made videos of how we were marching and how we stopped a dozen armored vehicles. There were so many people walking down the street that they couldn't drive through. They just stood there and were shouting, "Russians are fascists" to them. One of the occupiers lost his temper and opened fire into the air. We went to the Park of Glory and held another rally there. A car went past, and its PA announced, "Mass rallies are prohibited." It is forbidden to hold mass rallies in Kherson. Everybody leave. During the occupation across the bridge, there were checkpoints before the island, towards the Korabelny district. And they were checking all of the trolley buses and cars going to the island or leaving it. But around the 6th or 7th of November, they disappeared. They were gone.
The checkpoints?
Yes, every day there were fewer and fewer vehicles. There were not so many military personnel anymore. The 9th of November was the last day when I saw some soldiers at the market. Before that, they were buying clothes in the store, carrying bags of clothes, and buying warm clothes at the market. And on the 10th of November, when I came out, I didn't see anyone anymore. And then, on the 11th of November, we started celebrating our independence. The key thing is that we are free. We can walk in peace, talk to each other peacefully, and live the same way we did in free Ukraine.
Have you always spoken Ukrainian?
No, I haven't. But in the middle of the occupation, step by step, I started speaking Ukrainian. A friend of mine who lives in America, with whom I played football at the Labanovsky tournament, Serhii Volodkevych, said, "We need to communicate in Ukrainian." And I gave him my word that from that day, I would communicate with him in Ukrainian. So now I try to communicate more and more in Ukrainian.
You speak well. And I suppose it's important to return to your nation's native language.
Yes, it is. So that as many people as possible communicate in Ukrainian, and Russians won't have a picture that there is a Russian world here, as they say.
To stay here forever, as they wrote.
Forever, huh? And yet they followed that Russian worship. 24th of October, Kherson. There was a monument to Alexander Suvorov, but the Rashists took it away, along with stolen toilets and sinks. On the 6th of October, the occupiers organized holidays for children. They took them to Anapa and Crimea for recuperation, free of charge. Then they showed videos of children playing, being happy, and eating. And there were no explosions. And then they announced, now it is dangerous in Kherson, so we cannot return the children back here. So those parents who wish to reunite with their children have to come to them instead. Some parents went to be with their children. They stayed together for maybe a week. And then they were told, as the next group will be arriving soon, you need to go to Russia. We will give you a place to stay there. The children will be happy.
So in fact, they kidnapped people.
They did. They also took children from orphanages. I have a neighbor who is a principal of an orphanage. He said that the members of the staff managed to hide several children, but unfortunately, the Russians took most of them away. And not only from that particular orphanage, but also from kindergartens. The Russians knew that if they took the kids, they could do whatever they wanted with them.
I see. Why do you think Russia will fail?
Why will it fail? Almost everyone who wants to take over someone else's territory loses. Because people are defending their land.
Especially when it's a sovereign territory.
And as I said before, those whose life is soaked in cheap booze have no chance to conquer us.
Thank you so much. First thing, we met with the local celebrities. The video with one of them got millions of viewers because it was recorded during the first days of the liberation of Kherson. Quite unexpectedly, we met that guy again in the city centre, It's quite amusing that he works at the market. Such an ordinary guy. And that older man whom we met. He has fantastic stories about the resistance. Though this was actually the resistance during the first weeks of the occupation. All the video footage that we saw about the resistance in Kherson was, in particular, with his participation. And have you kept all of these videos?
Yes, I have photos and videos from the first to the last day, and until today. I transferred them to a flash drive, but I did my best to preserve them.
The man gave us 2 flash drives. I have them right here. These flash drives actually contain his rallies, his videos of all those rallies. You see, there is a New York keychain on this flash drive. It's there because, as he told us, he lived in New York. And I think that this is great material that we should bring back and archive. In general, for everyone who has any materials from the occupation, we are ready to receive them from you and archive them so that other documentarians can use it. Together with DocuDays, we make a war archive project, and we archive materials about everything that happened during the hostilities. Therefore, we will be grateful for any content. We will now record an interview with Artem. In 2014, he was internally displaced from Luhansk when fighting broke out there. He came to Kherson, worked in the theatre named after Mykola Kulish, and did not cooperate with the collaborators in the theatre. We'll have a chat and he'll tell us about his experience. What was happening to the theatre during the occupation?
Initially, the invaders didn't show interest in the theatre. They didn't even care about it as a space. Then the theatre started working when news about the so-called referendum began to roll out, sometime around the second half of August. And the first performances were shown to the occupational administration for approval, just like back in the Soviet days. They were very low quality, kind of like amateur performances. Not a single poster was hung in the city. Not a single ticket was put on sale. Not a single person came out and said, "Oh, I saw the performance. It was really beautiful."
Were you doing anything to preserve cultural life? I mean, you weren't just...
Well, it was hard to do anything related to culture. The priority was finding something to eat. There was no such thing as a concert front during the occupation.
But at the same time, Uncle Hersha was riding around blasting Ukrainian music.
Yes, we saw him and always supported him. Tell me, how's Kherson doing?
It's tough in Kherson. The situation with money is harsh. There is no way to get cash. But we're surviving and waiting. We're waiting for victory. And we are waiting for our guys to come.
Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to the heroes.
The first few months, we were living at the local cotton factory. City life was revolving around the markets, the Central Market, the Kherson cotton factory, and the Shumensky market. So, of course, we used to see Uncle Hresha all the time. We stayed really quiet. I wasn't even playing the trumpet, but on November 13th, I went out to play the national anthem on the square. I realized I might not be able to play it physically because it's hard when you haven't taken an instrument in your hands for 9 months and suddenly you want to play it. But I had enough strength.
Did it work out?
Yeah, it turned out well.
Що ми
Why will Russia lose?
Well, you know, I think it's inherent in their DNA. I mean, please, just take a look at those people. They swallow absolutely everything that they're being fed.
Damn, look at this place. Wow.
The centralized water supply is down.
You work at a medical college.
Kherson Medical College of Kherson Region Council. Yeah. We have a very long name.
And you teach physics?
Yeah, physics. And from this year on, biophysics. Because a teacher who taught it before went to work at a Russian college that was opened at our institution.
And where is he now?
We don't know that.
Or perhaps he got away.
Maybe. Maybe they had left a pharmaceutical business, bringing medicines and other products from Crimea, as far as I know. But I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they left as a whole family. I haven't seen them.
Were there many collaborators amongst the educators?
Let me think. 44 people around.
Out of?
Well, there were about 300 people, maybe 350, including part-time doctors who conducted practical classes for students and polyclinics and hospitals. Some educators even went to work in the Russian Department of Health.
How was cooperation encouraged?
Well, we weren't forced to. We had a pedagogical council during which they offered everyone who wanted to stay to work at a college at the Russian one. You had to write a formal request for that. If you hadn't, then you weren't allowed to come to college anymore. And that's all. So you had to go to the principal, ask for permission, and after that, only you could come back and pick up some things.
And did the educational process begin? Was it conducted somehow?
Yes, they started to work on the 1st of September. As far as I know, they recruited students for the first year in nursing, paramedical, and dental programs.
What was education like during the occupation?
Well, since lots of teachers refused to work, occupiers had problems, so there were a lot of newcomers. Apparently, no one left the schools, as far as I know. The occupiers tried to, of course, impose their own perception of everything.
What was happening with Ukrainian textbooks?
Our librarian, thank God, hid all of the Ukrainian books, because, well, anything could happen. As you know, they could have just been burned. And now we're taking them out and starting all over again.
So they survived the occupation, right?
They survived the occupation, thank God.
How did you greet our guys?
My mom and I went to a cafe where we could charge our phones. We had some coffee, and on the way back we met a neighbor who said, "Do you know that our boys are in the city?" I said, "No." He said, "Yeah." And I responded, "Until I see it for myself, I won't believe it at all." So I walked through the Freedom Square. There was already a Ukrainian flag hoisted, and Ukrainian songs were playing. I'm not a sentimental person, but I burst into tears. Even now. I'm sorry. Then on Saturday I was walking. The Georgian Legion was there. God, such great guys. Oh my God. I was asking them if they needed any food, some tomatoes, some jam, or something else. And they kept saying, "We don't need anything." And I said, "Just take it." We got to celebrate on Saturday. We have these elderly neighbors with whom we occasionally get together. Even during the occupation, life continued. We were celebrating birthdays, other stuff, having barbecues. And they used to say, "Don't be loud." So this time we asked, "Can we be loud?" And they said, "Hell yeah, be loud. That's it. Our army is in the city. We can do anything we want."
Yeah, that's true.
My heart is happy. I finally have the desire to live, to breathe. When I was walking around Kherson during those 8 months, it seemed as if there were no people in the city. And now I go to the main square, I'm stunned. Wow, such a huge number of cars and people around.
Were people afraid to even leave the house?
We were leaving our houses, but walking like this. It was so scary. There were many kadrovtsi and soldiers with V signs. Gosh. Now it's all right. It's great. Yeah, we're also waiting for the left bank of the city to be liberated. And for the Crimean bridge to be blown up completely. Completely, so that nothing remains of it. And we're also waiting for that jellyfish that came with the bridge to disappear from the Azov Sea once and for all.
Now we can hear explosions in the background. This is such a routine thing that no one even pays attention to it anymore.
Not at all. We don't pay attention at all. Especially during the occupation. You know something funny? When the Russian air defense systems were active here, there's boom, and everyone's standing up and waiting for it to be hit. And they're like, oh, it did, yay! And it's the same now. I mean, it's scary, but what can be done? This is life. I mean, which part of Ukraine is not getting attacked? I have students in Lviv and Vinnytsia and Kiev and everywhere else, and they write me, and I ask, where are you? They answer, we're in the basement. Well, okay, let it be in the basement. Most importantly, they're alive and well.
Why will Russia suffer defeat?
Because it's dealing with Ukraine. You better not fight with Ukrainians at all. A German or some other politician, Otto von Bismarck, I don't remember, he said, the mind cannot understand Russia. It's very difficult to understand them. Seriously. During the occupation, we were walking around the city. You couldn't even picture them as military. And when the Ukrainian army came, you could see real men, true warriors, true Cossacks. Now that's why the Russians will lose.
So, let's go.
Okay, let's go.
Press the button.
Today is the first time we're going to Kherson on a press tour, and we'll see what we're going to see.
Everything will be fine. Please, from what media?
We made a small stop near Posad Pokrovsky. Sappers are working. By the way, a representative of the State Emergency Service told us that the sappers from all over Ukraine are working in Kherson Oblast today. This is the most mined area since the 24th of February. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Oh, glory to heroes, kids. Glory to heroes. You have no idea how long we've been waiting. Oh, it's so nice to see you. There's no connection. My phone is as old as I am. There's no communication, nothing. But I was walking from the market and I saw 4 of our soldiers. I fell on my knees in front of them, my child. Oh, they're so beautiful. They're not wearing balaclavas. They're all in new uniforms and shaved. You know, my daughter always believed that Ukraine would not abandon Kherson. Thank God. May God give health to our military. God bless all Ukrainians who are waiting, and having faith. I couldn't calm down when he said, Putin said, his quote, "Who sows the wind shall reap the whirlwind." This is Valdai. I think now he has what he wished for, right? My child. Of course. May God grant you good health. I'm very, very happy. As I see the military, I can't help myself. I'm an old woman. I've lived a long life, but I have a grandson.
Oh, I'm crying. Due to the occasion of the liberation of Kherson, a neighbor gifted me this tree and told me to plant it in honor of the liberation of Kherson, and it will be called Victory, right here. I'm already starting to plant it. Yes, I'll put things in order a little on the flower bed because I wasn't willing to do anything before, and now I am.
Tell us about the day when the Ukrainian army entered the city. How did the locals react?
I'm still crying. They were honking, everyone was shouting, everyone was screaming, including ourselves. It was marvelous. We are so grateful to our warriors. They're such good lads. They are our guardian angels. Ukraine's glory and freedom have not died because we Ukrainians are united by fate. Our enemies will fade like dew in the sun because Ukrainians reign on their land. And don't you damn enemies dare to scare us or you'll go home in a casket. Something like this. This is what I feel.
Yeah, and it's gonna be like that. You're great.
My neighbor, Uncle Arkasha, gave it to me.
And there he is, on the second floor.
He gave us a plant. It will be named Victory.
Kherson was liberated from fascists on 13 March 1944. And from Russians on the 11th. The soldiers were 2 days ahead. Got it, right?
Yeah, but on the 11th of November.
Yeah, November. And one more thing. There was this man, Olmelchenko, Serhii Volodkevych, at the market in Kherson. He is now in Odessa. He's missing hands. He moves on a wheelchair, but he managed to collect 600,000 hryvnias for the Ukrainian army under occupation. I was under occupation from the 24th of February to the 19th of September. We came up to him and thanked him. We said, "You are a hero of Ukraine." And he began to cry.
We know him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We know about him.
Uncle Grisha,
We saw him and we heard his songs. Yes, we did.
I wish you good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
Now we are going to meet with the police department and the investigators who conduct criminal cases here, mainly against the Russians. We'll chat and find out what is happening here and now. We bought Zaspartak waffles. Waffles are with cacao. They cost 100 hryvnia, by the way.
Are you sure not rubles?
Yes, we just didn't have any rubles. Manufacturer LLC Spartak, Republic of Belarus, Gomel, Sovetskaya Street, 63. Made on the 15th of August 2022. They're super fresh. Too bad they hadn't sold out on time. We are currently located on Teploenergetiv Street 3. This is,
the temporary detention facility premises,
and in fact, it served as a torture chamber.
as torture chambers for keeping citizens.
How did the Russians choose such places?
It is clear. This is a perfect place to keep people. After all, this is still a temporary detention center. Suspected criminals were kept here, and that means there was a certain infrastructure for this. But how they used it is another question, because the cells were overcrowded, and people were actually improperly fed and tortured in various ways. So this is a difficult question. Four places of torture have been recorded in Kherson so far, and we are in one of them right now. These are the rooms where the Russian military actually lived. There were different branches of the armed forces, which periodically rotated. So many have been here to these rooms, to put it like that.
Did they clean up everything here?
If you can call it like that.
We visited Izium and Balaklia. What's happening there is crazy. What's happening there is crazy.
It was also crazy here.
Glory to the soldiers of the Russian Federation, Zeds, Russian Cossacks. We'll make a demon out of any sucker. Are these traces of blood?
It looks like blood, at least. In this room exactly, tortures were carried out, and there were signs pointing that out. Traces of batons on the wall. On this table, there was a field telephone, a kind of dynamo, to which wires were connected. These wires were getting connected to prisoners, to their bodies, to various parts, including genitals, and an electric current was passed through their bodies. This is how they were being tortured. They were getting beaten, electrocuted, waterboarded, and put on gas masks to block their airway. The torture methods were diverse, and this is all according to those who experienced it.
There are broken bars here. Has someone tried to escape from here?
I think it's impossible to escape from here. Hardly anyone would have dared, especially after being tortured, when people could barely walk and breathe, let alone run away.
What does it say? Serhii? They drew the coat of arms of Ukraine in the middle. You see?
Maybe that's how they see Ukraine.
And there, on the other side, is the Crimean Tatar symbol.
So I spent a long time over here while they were doing some manipulations with the phone over there.
Here, right?
Yeah. I could hear someone getting interrogated in the opposite room. So I was on the right, probably yes. I was in the so-called pencil case, and the person was interrogated here. I could hear a woman scream. This room is called a pencil case. I was sitting here. They put me on the edge, and he sat on the opposite side, talking to me. They put tape over my eyes, so I couldn't see anything. The woman, she was screaming badly. It lasted for a while, for more than 10 minutes. Several people were being interrogated at the same time. So you could hear constant screams throughout days and throughout the nights. I mean, endless male and female screams.
And where were you kept?
I was kept on the second floor, in cell 11. Here's my cell. There were always at least 7 people here. Here we were eating. Everyone had their own water bottle. But the water was undrinkable, which we collected from the tap. The light was on all day and all night. Here we had bunk beds, and the other 3 people were sleeping on the floor.
Did you take turns?
No. Those who had already slept in a particular place stayed there. If a place became free, it was given up voluntarily. If a person was elderly, we would free a place for them.
How were you brought here?
I was taken in a Renault, in a minibus, with my eyes covered with tape and my hands tied with a rope. You know, they were solving some of their personal issues while driving around the city, buying some stuff, and then they brought me right here.
Did they try to drive around the city to confuse you?
You know, as I understand, they were just doing their own business. And when we arrived here, as I said, immediately there was brutal violence. They were beating me on the head, beating my head against the wall, and then they put me in a pencil case where I was sitting, and I heard how they were interrogating and torturing the girl who was brought with me.
How did they get you?
Near my house. Well, the thing is that the house in which we lived, it was hit by rockets. We came up to it to see whether our windows and apartments were intact or not. They got suspicious of me because I didn't spend the night at home when there was a strike. And that was enough to detain me. If someone opened a window, even to just the backyard at night or during the day, it was mandatory to stand with hands behind your back. You had to look out the window. When they entered the cell, we had to shout, "Glory to Russia, glory to Putin, glory to Shogu." Almost every day, their workers would come with a stun gun and demand that we sing the national anthem of Russia. Sing it unison, line by line. If someone stumbled or whatever, they had to turn around and get hit in the neck with a shocker. The hit was so powerful that the man fell face down on the floor, then got up. This could continue several times. In the evening, they could do a concert. It didn't happen to my cell, but the people from another cell were demanded to sing songs that Russians liked, such as Gentlemen's Officers, and others. They handed out what was needed to be learned to sing in the evening, and we had to clap along. If some cell didn't applaud, they could come and punish everyone who was in that cell.
That's brutal.
They could just hit somebody on the head just for looking when they were entering the cell to distribute food.
How did you learn the Russian anthem?
The anthem, it had to be learned. Let's say you were detained in the evening. You had to learn it by the morning. If you didn't know it, they punished anyone who didn't know it. Later they could punish an entire cell by banning the possibility of receiving packages from outside.
Did your families know you were here?
Packages were brought on Tuesdays and Thursdays if people had any relatives and they knew about them being here. After I was released, it was my duty to bring packages to those who stayed here because there wasn't much left for the people that were here.
For me, the most shocking was a story about the concerts. Because in other cities where we have filmed previously, maybe we just phrase a question like that because we didn't know that this could be really happening. But here, for the first time, we heard that they were forced to applaud. And the Russians threw concerts and sang their favorite songs and forced prisoners to sing them too. It's just unfathomable. And this cell, where all the walls were covered with lyrics, is something incomprehensible. And of course, there's Lermontov. You see? Unbelievable.
Out of all the deoccupied territories that we visited, Kherson was under occupation the longest. It seems that the Russians partially managed to establish their Russian world rules. And here, after communicating with our heroes, and what we saw in those exact torture chambers, the imperial narrative of Russian culture is very clearly felt. As which many already say, Pushkin and Lermontov are also invaders. And when it's written on the walls in the torture chambers, when people were forced to memorize the poems by Lermontov, well, you know, there are people who advocate for leaving Lermontov in the Ukrainian school program. The same Lermontov whose poems are written on the walls of the torture chamber. After this, there's absolutely no place for Russian poets, neither in our school programs and in our life whatsoever.
For my pro-Ukrainian position, the Russians detained and tortured me for 54 days.
What did you do before the full-scale invasion?
Before the full-scale invasion, I was manufacturing furniture. I was a volunteer, a deputy, and I worked in a public organization. On the 24th of February, at about 6 in the morning, I heard some kind of explosions or something. I didn't understand what it was. Then my mother came in, holding a phone in her hand, crying and saying that the war has started. We got up and thought about what we had to do. We decided we needed to get some water and go to buy food. I stocked up on food back on the 20th of February because I had a feeling that something was going to happen. This was when the Russians recognized the so-called LPR and DPR.
And what was next? How did the events unfold? In fact, rallies began in Kherson.
The rallies started in March, and on the 1st or 2nd of March, after the Russians entered the city. At first, they were in the region and in Kherson. The locals didn't really understand what it was. The territorial defense was organizing there. Everyone was making Molotov cocktails. It was the thing to do.
But those Molotov cocktails were never used.
No, they weren't. The guys did not understand that it was a regular army, and cocktails are not effective against them. In the first week, I realized that there might be some kind of battles around. So I stayed at home. I did not go out. When everything became clear, rallies began. The Russians did not know what to do. They were stunned. They are not used to such resistance, because in Russia, there it is very rare. Russians just get arrested there. And here, half the city came out and started fighting against them. They were shooting in the air, but our people were not afraid. And we're still marching at them. The guys put a Ukrainian flag on top of a Russian armored personnel carrier. This photo traveled across the world. My friend Irina Derevyanko called me and said, "We need to do something. Let's create a humanitarian center." A week later, the city ran out of food. And I remembered that I had a friend, Dmitro Oldinovsky. By the way, he is now defending our borders. As I know, he is already in Donbass. And he was a farmer. He had 100 tons of potatoes there. They had been a little spoiled already. I called him and said, "Dimitro, people are starving. Let's distribute potatoes, because not a single car can come or leave the city." And he gave the potatoes. We started getting it and distributing to the local district councils. I started streaming videos, and everyone started writing to me, "Can I get some potatoes?" We started distributing the potatoes, and around the same time, we went to the mayor's office. I was led to organize a humanitarian center in school number 23.
The city council was still Ukrainian at the time, wasn't it?
It was still normal, yes. And we started feeding people there. Little by little, local business owners were bringing us food. And we were cooking. And we were still cooking for the military.
What is the name of this initiative?
There's none. We called ourselves Glass Container, since it was the name of the location. We are still working, and now humanitarian aid is coming there. They gave us a Starlink and set up with a generator. That's how we work.
Where did Stroies and Saldo come from?
Stroies is originally from Donbass, but he moved to Khmelnytskyi. There he was a fish inspector. Then he stole something there. After that, he became a raw food eater, conducted Russian races with flags in our city. Then he went to Latin America, traveled there by motorcycle, and there he was either bitten by mosquitoes, as they say, or something like that. And he, as I understand it, went crazy. In 2014, he started running there with a portrait of Yanukovych, saying he was a man from the president. Then he went to the police, worked in the security service of Ukraine in 2022, went to Crimea, China, and met with some curators there. We found out about this later. For the first 2 weeks of the full-scale invasion, he was not in touch with the Russians in any way, as I understood from his video stream. And then, on the 9th of May, as far as I understand, he and Volodymyr Saldo were scamming Russians, saying that there was practically the Russian world here. And then, when the Russians came, but there was nothing like that here, so they forced them to become collaborators. At first, Saldo was claiming that he was forced. Then he avoided talking about it. But later, they became very obvious collaborators.
What lesson should we learn from this today? Is there a feeling that Kherson residents somehow reflected on this experience?
They have, but not a lot of them. It's necessary to crash such fuckers like Stroies and Saldo immediately. You can't give them any benefit of the doubt. We need active citizens to unite, as Katya Hantyuk wrote, to crash the traitors. Because, as you can see, a Russian tank comes after Pushkin's poems and monuments to Lenin.
How did your story unfold later? How were you captured?
In 2014, I was part of Right Sector for a month and a half, and I saw the Russians started coming up to the guys who were in Right Sector. For the first 2 weeks, I was hiding. I saw that the detentions have already ended. I returned home, and no one was touching me. And then they knocked on my door and conducted a search. Took out 2 laptops, a hard drive, and flash drives. By the way, when they did that, I had a phone case with a print that said, "Who ordered Katya Hantyuk's death?" The FSB officers found it and decided to arrest me. My mother asked, "And when are you?" They said, "We'll talk to him and he'll come back." I returned 54 days later.
What now can you personally advise people who are now coming out of captivity or returning from torture rooms? What should they do? Seek some kind of psychological support, or?
You need to take vitamins, seek help, and sleep more to recover. I've been recovering for about 2 months. And now I work with a psychologist.
What do you think will happen to Kherson next?
To the region?
With the city. The whole region is yet to be deoccupied.
I think that in a couple more weeks the Ukrainian army will push them back. I think that we will also liberate Crimea before next summer. Now they will push back the Russians and everyone will return to Kherson.
Yes, when it is pushed back, How important is this left bank for the city, for Kherson? Well, in fact, it is not really the city of Kherson on the left bank anymore. There are towns of Oleshki, Ola Plishtan.
Yes, it's not Kherson there, but those are people, and they need to be liberated.
But people often talk about the left bank of Kherson as if it is a part of the city.
Yeah, yes, it's true. Those are our people. We need to liberate them. We will not abandon them, and the guys are giving their lives for that.
Why will Russia suffer a defeat?
Because we are free and strong. The spirit of Cossacks lives in us.
Thank you.
A representative of the partisan information movement named Yellow Ribbon, who goes under the pseudonym Taras, agreed to talk to us. And Taras will tell us today how it all started in the city, how they were working, and what the participants of this movement managed to do.
It all started on April 25th. We started to spread info that on the 27th of April, we would organize a rally against the Kherson People's Republic. We encouraged people to come with posters, with postcards and yellow ribbons. And we managed to organize a rally for 500 people. This rally was violently crashed by the FSB officers.
You mean the video on the web where people were shot?
Yeah, well, it's not that they were shot, they just threw stun grenades at them. They were getting stopped by Rosgvardia, FSB officers, the military police of the Russian Federation, and so on. If we take it in terms of informational warfare, we strongly boosted the talk about Kherson. We showed the atrocities of the invaders. And I'm absolutely sure that we prevented them from holding a referendum quickly. Our movement gained a very, very great resonance in Kherson. We were urging people to hand out yellow ribbons and draw yellow ribbons. And the invaders were furious. We sent postcards to our people who were here. This, for example, is a leaflet against Russians forcing their passports on Ukrainians.
Is there something flying?
It's all right, it's not our direction. Over here, please.
Why the yellow ribbon?
It's one of the colors of our national flag, and as you know, it has a really vibrant energy, yellow. It's just easier to apply yellow paint. I'm sorry, do you know anything about the yellow ribbon?
Yes.
What exactly did you hear?
It was our partisans in Kherson who were working hard and supporting us.
And you're from Kherson, right?
Yes, we stayed here in Kherson for all these 9 months, held on, and were very much waiting to be liberated by our armed forces of Ukraine.
That's cool, that's great.
And let us be without light, without water, without heating, but let us be free. Many thanks to our defenders.
Thank you for your resistance. You see, that's the effect. They already know about us, and that's awesome. 3,000 people. We definitely have up to 3,000 people spreading across the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. I'll tell you the truth. We saw a woman, didn't we?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of women like that who also joined in, who were gluing something at night, hanging yellow ribbons, making graffiti with the symbol of the Ukrainian armed forces. There's a lot of them, and we don't know yet what the real number is, because I assume it's more than 3,000. Many activists also, they can't show us the result of their work, so they just keep on working, and we find out about it later. Here, look, a yellow ribbon near the city council of Kherson. I really hope that Mr. Stremousov from the Kherson Regional State Administration was walking here together with Saldo and saw these yellow ribbons. Excuse me, have you heard anything about the yellow ribbon?
I saw it at the bus stop. In the morning I was traveling in public transport and people tied up yellow ribbons. And in the morning you can see that someone was working at night.
Did it help you in any way? Maybe it supported your morale?
Of course, this meant that our guys were somewhere close. We believed that our guys would come.
Our people were hanging them everywhere, on the streets, on the poles. We're now feeling what freedom and liberty are. We can now calmly walk around the city. 8 months of being under occupation, as if in a vice. We were afraid to walk around the city. Oh, I'm telling the truth, aren't I?
We were walking and looking down so that we wouldn't have to see them.
Yeah, I told you, excuse me, but I have sneakers that are black and yellow. I had to paint over yellow. So you were a partisan.
Do you see how many Ukrainian flags are raised on top of cars now? People found them. First they were buried and now they are raised. And when these so-called Russians liberators came...
Liberators! Yeah, they liberated us from everything.
We had to tie white pieces of clothing to the cars so they wouldn't shoot us.
Yeah, people who had cars attached white ribbons.
Then they were getting dirty. The Russian world is a dirty, white rag.
And the Russian flag, it's also a dirty rag.
Look, but people said, here they saw the yellow ribbon. For them, it was some kind of hope. How did you react when you heard the track My Kherson by Palindrome?
It's cool. It's really awesome. I really like that he showed Kherson as it is. And in this video, there's freedom, and freedom is also the national idea of Ukrainians. It wasn't shallow, which they're trying to impose on us. Our national idea, it's freedom, and it's victory.
We actually tried really hard to make this video touching for people from Kherson. We even made calls with local experts.
We posted it right away.
Wow, that's great. Listen, whose work is the portrait of Zaluzhny?
I don't know. This, by the way, it's really cool. It took me a bit of time to realize that it was Zaluzhny. I thought it was Hrushevsky. That's true. Both God and Zaluzhny are with us, and that's really cool.
Guys, we just met with Ivan. Ivan is also one of the founders of the Yellow Ribbon movement. And yeah, actually, they're the heroes of our time. So tell me, where are we now and why?
Right now, we're at 129 Kulik Street. Kirill Stremousov lived in this building. According to our activists and our local residents, he lived in apartment 48. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a large yellow ribbon on the entrance so that it also reminds the locals, so that it terrifies Kirill and the collaborators who remain in the city.
It will. Let's start. Friends, we can't film as we usually do, our normal stories, because the guys are doing really important work, so publicity is dangerous for them. It's a great joy that they've agreed to talk to us. So I'm sorry that some shots may be taken from behind their back and it's not very aesthetic, but it's safer for the guys. So, oh, watch out, there's a curb.
We have had a very good shoot today in Kherson. We managed almost everything we planned. The last few interviewees have told us quite a lot about the resistance and about what we actually focus on and what we want to show, because the stories of deoccupation are stories about how people heroically resisted the occupation, bringing our victory closer, bringing the liberation of all our territories closer, including Crimea, which will eventually be liberated, and where we will definitely go to film our deoccupation series. And we actually had a few conversations that we aren't able to show. There was one subject who refused to be shown. We had a very cool conversation with him. But unfortunately, we can't show this yet in the series. Because it was about how traitors were killed. We filmed a story about Kherson in two teams. First, Karina, a producer, went and shot one part of the story.
Today, we had a busy and very interesting day. We visited Kherson for the first time after its liberation from Russian occupation. And although the day was busy and we're tired, I personally have very nice feelings inside. Some kind of quiet, joy, and peace. Because in fact, what we saw was incredible. We drove along the streets and people were just waving at the windows of our buses and drivers were honking back at them. People were waving flags. And I was also struck by one story. We went to one of the residential courtyards and there was this woman holding a tree seedling, which was given to her by her neighbor, who said, "Plant a victory in our yard. Let it grow."
A neighbor gave me a juniper tree and said, "In honor of such an event, plant a tree."
Almost everyone was crying, both men and women. It was really sincere.
We've already finished filming. Karina and the team were at the beginning. We decided to work this way. But in fact, we made such a big episode about Kherson and the diversity of this resistance, because the resistance in Kherson was really strong. And I think it will be a very good release in the end. If you like what we do, you can support us on Patreon, subscribe, and be sure to write a comment on this video, because this will help us to promote it on YouTube. Goodbye, everyone.